Fun and games for Ferrari at the Russian Grand Prix, where it managed to lose the race and start a load of tension between its drivers. Ben Anderson and Stuart Codling are here with me to dissect what went on at Ferrari. Codders, let's start with the drivers themselves. Vettel obviously got into the lead as part of a pre-race agreement, it seems, and then pulled away a little bit, was asked to move over and didn't. Should he have just respected the agreement?
I'm kind of torn on this because on the one hand, if you make an agreement, you should honour it. Just as a sportsman, you ought to. On the other hand, they're racing drivers, so you shouldn't really expect them to honour agreements they've made. They've got
Vettel's
history.
got previous there as well.
Yeah, he's got previous. We've seen it all through the years, drivers falling out because because one or the other has reneged on an agreement. And to my mind, what Vettel did brilliantly was he executed his what some people might regard as treachery brilliantly, because he left the team with their hands tied. There was no way they could, well, I suppose they could have a Valtteri, it's James conversation and ask him to slow down. But what team on earth would do that to a lead driver, say you've got to slow down in order to put back to proportionately right the wrong? So it was an absurd scenario.
Yeah, Ferrari have tied themselves in knots with team orders in the past. They have a bad history with first corner pre-race agreements, as we know, and also recently with Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen, the German Grand Prix, trying to order Kimi to move aside without ordering him to move aside, and he just wanted clarity. In this case, they were very clear with Vettel, and he should really have respected that agreement. It was quite clear, but he seemed to take issue with it, having got into the lead, saying that I would have got him anyway. So maybe he felt there was some grey area in terms of how good a start he actually made versus what they expected. And I think also there was a desire from Vettel to gain some revenge for what happened in Monza qualifying, where he was supposed to get a tow from Charles Leclerc in Q3 and he didn't get that tow and ended up losing out on pole position, having probably his worst race of the season. So he's probably thinking, well, two can play at this game. If you're not going to respect an agreement, then neither will I.
You could argue that if there were grey areas, they should probably have thrashed those out in advance as well. If this presumably very long and voluminous and multi-stage conversation about all the scenarios that might eventuate there.
Write it down.
Well, how you couldn't see that one coming as well is beyond me. So let's look at the team, Ben. For whatever reason, they felt the need to come up with this agreement. Is that at the root of all this? People can talk about if Vettel's at fault, but really, is this Ferrari's fault?
Yeah, ultimately, it is down to the team. They wanted to stage manage this race, secure the 1-2. I think they probably overreacted to the potential threat of Mercedes at the start. They were defeated, having locked out the front row at Sochi in 2017 when Valtteri Bottas blasted past on the run to turn 2 and never looked back. So maybe that was still in the minds of the strategists, thinking, Lewis is going to be a big threat. But since 2017, Ferrari have developed the best engine in Formula One quite clearly. Their car this year is much more slippery than the Mercedes in a straight line, and both of their drivers were starting on the softest compound tyre and Lewis was on the medium. So I think they overestimated the threat of Hamilton at the start and everything that followed on from there, really.
So Codders, Ben mentioned there was a bit of needle at Monza as well that perhaps could be considered the start of all this. But has Ferrari's decision to try to stage manage this race and its early failure to do it, and then it fixed it at the pit stops and it was all going to be fine, but have they made the situation worse? And are there going to be long-term repercussions here in terms of the rivalry between the drivers? Because Vettel's effectively shown Leclerc there that when there's a game to be played, I'm going to play it. So are the gloves off?
The whole world saw, it was laid bare on the radio broadcast that the team was dysfunctional. They weren't able to manage their drivers. They didn't have them under control. The drivers were pushing back against instructions. That then fed into further conspiracy theories about, did Ferrari deliberately nobble Vettel at the pit stops? And it just becomes part of this ridiculous conversation that no one needs to have. Leclerc now, I think he's going to learn from this in the same way that he learned from being schooled by Max Verstappen on track in Austria. He's going to be much more wary of conversations like that before the race. He's going to be wary of what Vettel's doing. So in many ways, Vettel's kind of used up this little tactic and he won't get away with it again. If he does, Leclerc will just be very naive in letting him get away with it. I'm not sure he will, because we've shown that once Leclerc has kind of realise where the ground rules in a scenario is. He's quite brutal.
It's a key time for Ferrari, this, because the genie's already out of the bottle, really. Vettel showed he would play the team game in Belgium, then felt he got screwed over in Monza. Now he's reacted in Russia, and we saw with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg at Mercedes, if you don't nip this kind of situation in the bud, then it can just run out of control very quickly, which is very exciting for the fans, but bad news for the team.